Oh, right. It's Wednesday. We're live. My name's April Sabral. We're back with our weekly episode of The Positive Effect. And today I'm so excited to have Melissa Latham on the call. So welcome, Melissa.
Thank you. So great to be here, April. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, I love it. I mean, anybody that's had a long career like you in retail and led sales teams, it's my jam because that's what I've done too. So I'm super excited to get to know you a bit more. I've been following you on LinkedIn. I like all your posts and everything that you do. So just before we get started, I love to just say, if you're joining us for the first time, please put your name in the feed. Tell us where you're coming from and, make any comments as we go through. And if you find this in your feed, please share this and tag it with somebody in your retail network because we want to get this conversation out to as many people as possible. And you can also subscribe. Apple Podcasts, Spotify now, it's downloaded within the week after. So this show is all about celebrating our industry and the positive effect of leaders within it and all the great stuff that we're doing. And, Ron Thurston, who's a friend of mine, he got me thinking about this, is your retail career intentional or was it like accidental? Because he wrote that whole book about it. So we're going to start off with that, Melissa, and then go into your story, because I think our audience love to learn, have mentorship, and learn from people that, have done the job and really learn any lessons that you can share with us. But was your career accidental or was it intentional in retail?
I think it was a bit of both. It started way back in the 80s. And I actually have a degree in classical music performance, thought that was going to be my life. But I always had an interest in fashion. And from Long Island originally. And one day I just decided I was going to get a job in retail. So I got all dressed up and I walked the mall and I happened to walk into Casual Corner, which I'm sure a lot of people remember from a long time ago. And I met two of the most influential women I've ever met in retail. A lot of you might know Orion Weinbrecht from The Gap and Teresa Szynski were in Casual Corner, the manager and the district manager. I walked in at the right time. I met them both. I interviewed with them both. And that afternoon I had a job.
Wow.
So I guess it was a bit accidental, though that was my intention for the day, to find a job in the mall and be into fashion. And it just continued to blossom from there. So that's really how I got my start. And I was a key holder on the sales floor.
Wow. So you walked in intentionally to get a job and you met these significant women, which I love. Yeah. And then did you think that you would be in retail for your career? No, you didn't. Because you've had some very amazing, significant roles as you grew through your retail journey. So can you give us like a quick, I know it's long, but like a quick overview of like what happened and where you went and like basically what you've learned along the way?
Oh my gosh, the learnings are continuing and I could write a novel about that as well. But I was really fortunate. I get very hooked at starting at Casual Corner because I love the customers. I love selling. I love the product. And I love leading people. So it just moved very quickly. I was in store leadership for a very short period of time, only 2 years. And then I was a district manager for 18 years with quite a few companies. So that's where I spent, the bulk of that middle portion of my career. I worked for Cato for a long time. I worked for Goody's Family Clothing. They're not around anymore, but think of like a Kohl's in a stage stores. So I had a little bit of big box. I eventually went to the Limited. And back when Limited Stores was still here, which was just, I think, such a turning point for me in developing leadership style, business acumen, execution. It was just a wonderful time in retail. And then I moved into a regional position. I went to Lane Bryant. And then I had my first head of stores opportunity back in 2008, and I was promoted into Catherine's, which was Lane Bryant's sister. Again, no longer with us. So that got us moving across the country. Now we're up in Philadelphia. I was head of stores there for 4 years. What a great experience. And I did some international work. I worked for a Saudi organization that franchises European retail all over the world. And they wanted to come to the US. So I was one of 4 people who were able to bring 10 European brands over to the United States and get them up and running. Really fascinating experience. And it put me in positions that I had no experience in. Logistics, getting shop fits made in Europe and getting them on a boat to come to the US. We signed 75 leases, hired 800 people, and built an office on Fifth Avenue in 12 months. It's the best retail story of my life to have done that. So what a great experience. And then I was in juniors for a little bit. My last 2 roles, I was head of retail for Vera Bradley, the women's handbag and travel company.
Yeah.
And then lastly, I was the vice president of North American retail for Jockey International, the original underwear company out in Wisconsin. So one role just kind of led to the next. I was very fortunate to have been recruited to all of my positions, except that European one that I was talking about. I found that role myself. And I also had the great fortune of leading all the departments that I wanted to. So whether it was product development, merchandising, marketing, operations, the field, HR, IT, real estate, I was able to have it all and experience it all. And so that's kind of where it ended for me until I did the big pivot.
So, wow. First of all, that's an amazing career that you didn't think you were intentionally to get a job in a retail store, but look where it led you, moving around, having all these amazing experiences. And I love these stories because, you know, when I was back as a salesperson and then became a manager and not really sure what I wanted to do, and my career kind of took a very kind of like similar path to you. It's amazing what you can achieve in retail and what you can learn in retail, right? In field operations, and what you just experience and how that really translates into other things in life. Especially what you said about like you love leading people and leading teams, because we're in a people business when we're in retail. And you know, I used to have a lot of friends that'd be like, "Oh yeah, you just sell things." I'm like, "Oh no, we do way more than that." You know, let me, you know, myth bust a little bit about what we do in retail, right? But like, if you think back to one of the best leadership lessons you learned early in your career that you could share that could, you know, help somebody else, what would be some of those early lessons, leadership lessons that you learned?
You know, I think I was fortunate to learn early on, because sometimes it can take people a little bit longer. I value smart people around me, and I do not think I need to have the answer for everything, and I don't want to be the director of everything. And when you build a team of people that are like-minded, that have expertise, that are smart, that are engaged, that are hungry, and you're all on the same page, you can just let them go. Let people do what they do really well. Give them the freedom to do that. Mistakes are totally fine and will happen, and they should be expected. But I think the earlier you can feel comfortable with that as a leader, the more successful you'll be, without question. Question.
Is there a piece of advice that you got from a leader that you worked with in your career that really stuck with you?
You know, I think it all centers around that, because when you build your team and you entrust in them, and they have enough knowledge to move forward, you're going to move so much quicker. You can learn the operations, you can deliver the execution, you can open all the new stores, you can do all the things, but really honing in internally on who you are and how you choose to show up every day is important. And I think I would hope that people would say I was the same person every day. I had a lot of leaders that demonstrated that to me without being overt. And I paid attention to that. And I paid attention to some of the things that I may not have wanted to have replicated. But I hope that people would always say I was the same person every day. And I enjoy listening. I don't know that I did in the early part of my career, honestly, but I think as time goes on and you mature, I like to listen to people and to learn from them. So you got to put yourself in that vulnerable position as well, because it does work both ways. And if they can feel that you're a partner to them, and being a good leader, I think, is a partnership. Of course, you create the vision and you help people along the way. But a true partnership, I think, again, will just take you further. So
Yeah.
almost all the lessons that I've learned that were not tactical
Yeah.
were about leadership and people.
Yeah. Somebody asked, I was having lunch with somebody yesterday, and she said to me, how do you build trust? And I was like, that's a great question. I said, but I think building trust comes from how you show up, like you just said, every day, and your actions
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
speak to, you can't just say something. You actually have to show up, and you actually have to do what you're going to say, because that builds trust. You think about any relationship in life, when you're building trust with somebody, it's when somebody says something and they actually do it.
Yes.
And then creating that space for people to actually show up and be themselves,
Yes.
right? Because right now we're dealing with a lot of like inclusivity and like just creating that safe space, which is so important. And I think it's being curious and listen. Ron talks about curiosity a lot in the book as well. Retail Pride, that's a huge one. I do a lot of coaching with leaders actually on listening, and we have a listening quiz, and once they go through it, they're like, oh no, like I'm not good at listening. It's a hard one to practice, but when you master that and actually pay attention and become more self-aware of whether you are listening or not, it will make a huge difference in the way that your team feels about working for you.
Yes. Which in turn and builds that trust. And the other thing I would add too is I enjoy being a student of the business, and I always encouraged people around me to do the same. So how do you stay engaged with what's happening in the industry? What are you reading? Who are you reaching out to? I love finding people on LinkedIn that I know more than I about a particular topic, and just set up a connection so we can talk about it. But I think that's really valuable as a leader as well. You can't be stagnant, and you can't be just internally focused on what's happening within your four walls and your brand. You've got to really continue to challenge yourself to learn what's happening out there, because all that information you can bring back to your team and your brand to make better informed decisions.
Oh, 100%. You said about, I'm going to go into your recruiting journey and how that's happened, because I'm really interested in that. I know people want to know tips on how to recruit, because it's such a hot topic right now in retail with I don't even want to say that word anymore, but like just finding new talent, right? But like you talked a little bit about showing up. So I'm a big one on positive mindset, doing things to get you in the right space to lead your life, your teams. So what do you do to get yourself in that mindset or be positive? Like, is that important to you?
Yeah, that is so funny. I have lots of I work with a mastermind class every week. I've got a great group of friends and owners that I partner with every week, and we're reading all these different types of books. And they're really, we're all entrepreneurs. We all have to keep ourselves motivated and our teams. And we're studying laws of the universe. It's very interesting coming on this side, because it's all up to you. When you're on a brand side or an organization, a lot comes to you, right? That you can. But I'm very intentional about what I read, and positivity, how to be better at what I'm doing, how to be more cognizant of what's happening around me, who to surround myself with. So I feel like I work on that almost every day. And then it's great to have a team of people that are interested in those same things as well, right? Because it makes that conversation a lot easier. But I do have these books scattered all around my office and in my desk to make sure that I'm keeping that, nourishing my spirit, I'll say.
That's very important. I'm writing a new book about that, just so you know.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, it's going to come out early next year, because I feel like a lot of what I did throughout my career was that nourishing my spirit, was growing myself, and then I could then help other people. And I did it intentionally to be able to help other people. But I don't think I really recognized it until I became an entrepreneur, how important that was, and then how intentional that I am about that. Because like you said, when you're in the corporate, in the brand side, a lot of stuff, I love that you said that a lot of stuff comes to you, and now it's not. So I feel like, people always ask me about my success and my story. And I'm like, well, a lot of it is just, I had a self-development plan for myself every day, right? And I'm reading, and what I put in my mind in the morning, if I'm listening to a YouTube, whatever it is. I went to see Abraham Hicks like a month ago. Oh my God, I died. I was like, I wanted to see this woman for 25 years, But that self-development journey is so important. I think that's important for leaders to understand as well, that when they're doing self-development planning with their team, how important that is. And it's not just a business action plan, but it is a self-development plan that's going to help somebody become a better version of themselves.
Yes. You you always hear it in other, maybe other industries, but you have to take care of yourself before others, right?
Right.
That because eventually you will just drain and you won't have anything to give. So it is, but I think we are giving people and we are servant leaders. So we find a lot of joy in giving, but you have to be cognizant that you've got to do that for yourself as well. So that you always have something fresh or new or the energy to do it.
Right. Yeah, because retail is high energy. And a lot of people in retail, like you said, are servant leaders and get the joy out of giving to everybody else. That's one thing I recognize. And I think there's some work to be done there. So tell us about your story now, how you've shifted, because I'm always fascinated by this. People like myself, Ron, and you, and other people like Dean that was on the show last week, how you've shifted now from like being in that, executive role into entrepreneurship. How did that happen? And what are you doing now?
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. So everything changed for me back in February of 2020. So right before COVID hit. And I'm sure a lot of your viewers and listeners have experienced this. I too went through a transition. And so I was faced with a decision on now what? But I think got a little bit of gift of time where we all had to kind of stay in place. And, as we were going through COVID, and I wrestled with, do I go back into the corporate side? I felt I had a really successful 35-year career. I did everything I wanted. It's what I know to do though. So do I do that or do I do something differently? And many years ago, I always said, when I retire, I'll go into recruiting. Well, I believe me, I'm not retired, but I started thinking about that. And two other people that had been my colleagues at previous organizations had done the same thing, had joined Global Recruiters Network. So I started doing my due diligence and really contemplating, if I was successful for 35 years doing what I was doing, why couldn't I be doing this, right? And so it was like a mind shift of, for the back half of this year, or my life, my career life, why don't I build something for myself and give it a go, right? And just jump in and say, we're going to do this 100%. And I knew I'd be spending my time doing what I like to do. And I talk to people all day long. That's what I do. So I made the decision, off we went. My husband's my business partner. We own our office, but we are connected to over 225 across the US and Europe. So our network is exponentially bigger, but we started off with nothing, right? So no clients, no candidates, but I'll go back to, and people definitely know me this, for this, is that I always taught networking. I always taught connection. Before LinkedIn was ever invented, we were out there with our little black notebooks and walking them all. Who did you meet today? Who did you meet today? We'd write their names down, and people used to show me their books when I would do store visits. So I had really built up a network over the course of many years. And then once LinkedIn came along, that just made it even easier. So I leveraged my network. I didn't go out cold calling. I didn't try to call on people that I didn't know or businesses that I didn't know. I went back to the people that I had relationships with. And I just said, look, can I just tell you what I'm doing? And one thing led to another. And that's really how we got it off the ground. And the other thing I was sharing too is that I had to get over all the reasons why this wasn't going to work.
Right.
I thought I wanted to own my own business. And I always had the reasons of, oh, it's not a steady paycheck. How will I make that work? Or it doesn't come with a health insurance plan. How will I make that work? Like, there were always these hurdles that I never got over. And I got to the point where, okay, Melissa, figure it out. You can do it. And I did. And I can help other people with how I did that too. I'm very passionate about that. You can figure this out. And I know I posted yesterday, a lot of you saw that, you kind of earned, I use the term, you've earned the right to do what you want to do with your career and be in the right role and the right company and take the time to figure that out. But you can do it. You really can. So that's how we started. We're almost 2.5 years in. It's been an amazing journey and another learning experience I could write a book about. It's the highest of highs. It can be some low days as well. And especially when you're dealing with people all day long that have their own decisions to make and their own lives to consider. And so there's a lot of dynamic factors into this, but we're a team of 4 today. I'm really excited about that.
That's so great.
We have 2 full-time people with us and a beautiful, grateful list of, on my end, clients that have used us continuously and repeatedly, and new ones that we're signing every day. So we took the plunge. It's definitely been worth it. And honestly, I couldn't go back.
I always think that, like, could you, for those of us that like love retail and love running teams, sometimes I have that, like, I miss running a big team of people, but then I think, well, I just look at the whole of the industry and I go, this is my team now to help with all the leadership training and development. You just have to shift your mindset.
Right. Because you and I stayed in the industry. So we specialize in retail, wholesale, fashion apparel, and accessories. That's our sweet spot. Everybody on my team has at least 30 years in the industry. We've all been there, done that, led the role, held the role. And again, I go back to being a student of the business. I read everything I can every morning. I stay up on industry trends. I belong to a lot of network groups. So I still feel very connected in the industry. My joy comes from now putting the right people with the right company. Like, that's amazing. When they say yes to each other, it's just awesome.
Oh, I love that. So what advice would you give somebody then that's struggling with recruitment? Maybe they're in a field operations role and they're trying to build a team right now, because there's a lot of vacancies right now. I know a lot of people have left the industry that were in it, in those field jobs. What tips could you give that person to, because you're the master at this, obviously you did this and now turned it into your own business. So what advice would you give them?
So I think a couple of things. I find people to be very open to listen. So if there's any concern that someone has on their end about reaching out or being afraid to, or will they want to talk to me, you need to assume that they do, because people just really want to hear what's going on. They want to hear from you. If you're part of a brand, they want to learn from you. So err on the side that people will pick up the phone, people will respond to a text or an email, or my best friend is LinkedIn.
Yeah,
honestly. And now that I use it in a different capacity and I use different tools, but I find people are very quick to respond through LinkedIn. So that would be the first place I would share with anybody who is looking to hire themselves. Find the people on LinkedIn and just send them a connection, but don't start off with the opportunity. Just start off as a person. You're a person, they're a person, right? And just, you want to connect with them and get to know them, or just say hello or talk about business. And then that opportunity can come as a secondary part of that conversation. I think oftentimes when you lead with the opportunity, it becomes impersonal. And it doesn't always lead to, I think, that conversation that you want. So I would say, put yourself out there, utilize LinkedIn, talk to them as people first, try to get to know them, and just see if that's even something they're interested in, or if you think they're even right for the opportunity. And I would just utilize those 3, and then be visible as well. If you're on Instagram, if you're on Facebook, I'm on both. If you're posting on LinkedIn, have a point of view that you want to share. Let people see what you're about. And even if you're part of the brand, you still are representing that brand or your team or something exciting that brand's doing. But you have to be accessible too. So by putting yourself out there, people can find you more easily.
Do you think it is getting harder to get people to come into retail because you're working in recruitment every day? Or do you think there's a lot of talent out there just waiting to be found?
I think there's a lot of talent out there. I talk to people all the time that are not talking to me about a specific role or a specific opportunity that I'm working on. They just want to connect. They want to be heard. They want to make sure I can have their resume should something come along, and I set aside time every day to do that. So I spend a lot of time talking to people that I know one day I'll get to pick up the phone and call them and say, guess what? And I'm actually doing that right now with a beautiful brand and a beautiful position. But no, I think there's a lot of people out there. I know there's a lot of people that are applying for opportunities. I think a lot of brands need some help with being able to react to the amount of applications that they're fielding every day. It's not, this job takes a lot of time.
Oh yeah, I know. When I was at Apple back in 2010, I did a 10-month kind of like guest role as a recruiter. And I was like, oh my Lord, the amount of applicants. I actually felt like responsible that there was so many people that applied that they would never necessarily get seen just because there was just so many people applying. And so that system and that processes of how you do all of that. And then the other thing I always say to people, especially in the field, is like walk your mall or walk where your stores are and like know who works in the area. Do you know how many teams I have hired from just walking into a store and having a great experience with somebody? And also not assuming if they're not having a great day, that that's a reflection of who they are. Maybe they're having a stressful moment, or maybe they're just having a situation that's happening with a boss, or maybe their manager just left us. Anything could be happening. That just happened to me recently where I found one person in a mall that then recruited somebody that they used to work with, then they recruited their manager that they used to work with and brought the whole team with them. And I was like, wow, just from that one conversation. But I went to the mall every day for 5 days, like different times, trying to find people for this client, So I think that matters as well, like actually going out and meeting people.
Absolutely. Well, it got me my first job back in the 80s, right? So I definitely believe in that. And it's something about the personal interaction that I think is very meaningful. And plus, you should just be the mayor of your mall. You should know what's happening with the businesses, who may be coming, who may be leaving, what's happening with the anchors. Like, you just need to be that student of the business within your geography as well.
What would you tell your youngest self, Melissa?
Good question. I don't think I was a great student of the business back in the day, so I would start that immediately. And we have an awful lot more resources than we did. We didn't have we didn't have a lot of this that made things very accessible. And I think that could have continued to help me as well. And I may have sought out external coaches. So I pride myself on good relationships with the people that I work for and my peer group. And I would leverage them. But looking back, I never really had that external influence that could have been really interesting for me to kind of have that mirror held up in a different way than people that you work with every day. So that might have been it's kind of like a 360.
Yeah, that's so good because I agree, because sometimes when we're in a brand and we're so busy and we're heads down and we're doing everything we need to do to lead and inspire and coach, but we lack it for ourselves. And many times, I say this a lot to leaders when I coach them. People, you hold a title at some point, right? So people aren't always necessarily going to be 100% honest with you because of that title. And so I think when you have a coach that's external, they're not working for you or with you like that, you're going to have some more objectivity, some more honest discussions, some more dialogue. And I just know that from coaching people now, and wish the same thing, that I had done that earlier on in my career, because I think it would have made a huge difference. Maybe I would have been a CEO instead of a vice president. I don't know. Well, now I am. I'm a CEO of my own company, which is great. Right. Okay, so we're coming up on time. It always goes so fast. But my last question, really, well, I've got two questions. So I'm all about positive culture and creating a great space for people to work, because I feel like that is the magic formula to get positive results. I learned that through running retail teams, that when I had a positive culture, people felt good about what they did, it impacted the results, right? So what's something that you do, maybe now or you've done in the past, to create that positive culture?
Yeah, and I totally believe in that as well, because it's how I approach my day, always. And I don't do well with people around me that are trying to drag me down that way. So that does not work well for me. But back on when I was back in it with teams and stores, and even my corporate team, like, camaraderie was important to me. So at one of my organizations, we had we all brought in our lunch and we sat together. There was like 30 of us, but we did it. And that turned into like big buffets. And then everybody in the office wanted to come and eat with the store team. So, communing together was important. Celebrations are really important. Big boards on the wall where people can congratulate each other, not just me to them, but how can other people recognize accomplishments and be thankful for that, goes a long way. Taking people out of an office and letting them come on a store visit was huge, giving them different perspective, and vice versa, taking people from the field and putting them into the office so they had an understanding of how that could work better. So I think visibility is important. A comprehensive overview is important. Letting them be recognized. Honest feedback is important too, because if it's sincere and you are dedicated to their growth, and then that sincere, honest feedback has to be given as well. And then how do you just bring people together? And this is the most fun industry there is.
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say, you alluded to this before, I think there are no leaders like retail leaders. We are the most well-rounded, wear a million different hats, know how to affect every department, and really handling people and leading them and guiding them and coaching and everything we need to do to be with them. Everybody should want to hire a retail leader. We should.
I love that. I love that because, so many people that I speak to are trying to transition. You've done it. There's been many people that have done it, or they're thinking about whether retail is a career for them. And I always say, do it, because you know what? You're going to learn so much from working in a retail organization. Yes. To me, it's like the university of life and people skills that nobody talks about, like literally,
right.
Yeah. Okay, awesome. So is there anything else that you wanted to share with us that I didn't ask you about before we start wrapping up the call?
I would just say still feel great about the industry. All the reports are that, business continues to do well out there on the whole. And, I know there's always obstacles to overcome, but I still want people to be very excited about their leadership journey in retail. It's an amazing world. It's way bigger than just the brand that you're in. So be that great student of the business, really expand your horizons, keep learning, keep working on that positivity and how do you nourish yourself. And I am so happy to talk to anybody about their journey if they want to, clients if they want to, and if everybody wants to know how you can try and pivot, I'm happy to share my story one-on-one.
Amazing. So if you want to get a hold of Melissa, the best way to get hold of you is through LinkedIn. Just LinkedIn you, just send you a message.
Sure. I'm on it 24/7, so absolutely.
I love it. All right. Well, thank you so much, Melissa, for another amazing episode of The Positive Effect. We're wrapping up. And so just really grateful for all of your words of wisdom and you sharing your story and taking the time out of your busy day to be on with us and our audience. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you all for having me. And thanks, April. I enjoyed it.
Good. And then if you find this in your feed, I'm going to say it again, tag somebody, share somebody, subscribe. And these conversations are golden. So we want as many retail folks to hear about them and get involved. And with that, we'll see you on another show.